Today, self awareness and mental health tips for the African youth on Gizmo Mindset TV. Coming up! Hello, everybody. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you're watching us live, thank you for being here. If you're catching the replay, thank you for being here as well. Today, we have a special guest in the building,
Hey,
Mildred from the Self-Actualized Podcast. How you doing, Mildred?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me on here. I'm excited.
You're welcome. Where are you tuning in from?
From Maryland in the US.
Maryland.
Yep.
Okay, Maryland. Thank you for being here and thank you for your time as well.
Thank you.
So, like I was saying, Mildred is the host of the Self Actualized podcast. And today we'll be talking a little bit about self awareness and a few mindset and mental health tips that we all can use as African youth, African millennials to have better days in this life that can tend to look or tend to be a little hard sometimes. So
Yep.
I just want to ask you first, Mildred, let's just make it simple. What's your little story? Why did you start the podcast? How did that all come out to you?
Ah, okay. Well, okay, so for me, I think it started just based on like conversations with friends and family. But from a more educational background, I graduated or I what's it called? I majored in psychology. I did a double major in psychology and sociology and a
Mhm.
minor in philosophy. I know a lot of fees going on there. But when you do those courses and stuff, you're learning about individuals, you're learning about the individual mind, you learn about
Right.
individuals and their interactions in society, and of course with psychology, you're learning a lot about like mental health and all that. And being Nigerian and going to university in Canada, it was such a big deal to see how much awareness and how much discussions there were about mental health, something that unfortunately was never taught, at least when I was in high school. So
Mhm.
and then I picked such a in-depth interest in it. And it changed my perspective on life. Not just my perspective on life, but it made life make more sense. It made
Mhm.
emotions make more sense. It made mentality make more sense. It made me understand people more. Not just, who are they, but why are they the way that they are, right? And
Right.
so when I started my podcast, even though I've had my podcast for a few years now, believe it or not, I've
Mhm.
been back and forth because it's also even been like personally a mental struggle to kind of keep that
It's
going and
it's a
find
little journey.
that what
It's a little journey.
it's a little journey, so it's hard to like. It's like when I set it off, I started it in, believe it or not, I said it in 2008. I bought my first like mic. I was like, okay, I was going to do this.
Wow.
And yeah, no, sorry, not 2008, my bad, 2018.
Mhm.
And when I started that off, at that point I was like in this like deep crossroads in my personal life. Like a lot of transitions were happening, and I
Right.
found that like not only was it difficult to find people to speak to, I started to realize that there aren't a lot of people that are okay speaking about a lot of things, about certain transitions that are happening in their life.
Mhm.
And our society sometimes creates like this taboo to share, this
Right.
taboo to like talk about what's going on with you and all that. So when I created the platform, that was my intention, was to talk about self-awareness, self-actualization, which is the name of the podcast, the Self-Actualized Podcast, and all that. However, in the last few years, I would say that even though I have done, some things and I've had great conversations and I've done Instagram's life and whatnot, I've also, in a way, it's come to then challenge me because I found that I've been struggling to even talk about certain things, even within myself. You know what I mean? Like it's so scary to share
Yeah.
and it's so scary to be vulnerable. But
Yeah.
the goal is to keep going. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I agree with that. That's why I said a little bit earlier. Even putting yourself out there, it's already, oh, okay, wow, because that's really, really hard.
Right.
I never forget because today like I was saying, it's kind of like working out, and it's also a little journey, so it gets easier along the way. But
Mm-hmm.
then when I talk to people, even business owners that are pivoting and then just started making content, and then they feel all of these emotions. And then I remember when I put my first video, I'm like, oh my god, this is hard. So
Mm-hmm.
I understand. I really do feel that part of, oh man, this is really hard to do.
It's
So
hard. It's hard. It seems easy when you put it like in your head, like, okay, this is going to be great. I'm going to talk to people and stuff. But when you actually start to do it, you start
yeah,
to realize how much, it's not about like setting up the mics and doing that. It's like the emotional part of it, like how
yeah,
extremely vulnerable you would have to be. And if you're not there yet, you have to work on getting there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I
Mhm.
agree. And it's interesting, you were talking about being in college and having all of these conversations, especially all of these things taboo, and being African too. There is also all of these ideas around all of that. So maybe what did you have to overcome, or what maybe you've seen people struggling with in college, or even overall over your little journey?
I think the biggest thing is like identity. You
Mm,
um growing up, and I'm sure a lot of our Africans can relate. You get to a certain age when you realize that the identity that you thought was yours wasn't really yours. It was the one that your parents created for you, that
mhm.
your society created for you. Your ethnicity said that you should be, right? Your
Exactly.
society formed based on your gender, or based on gender roles for you. And somehow it becomes so embedded in you. And then you go through life and then you realize that all these things that were taught to me by what's it called, nurture with my parents, or religion, or through society, and those kind of, I don't necessarily identify with them. This is not how I'm currently feeling. And when you have to go against, or feel like you may have to go against something that you've known all your life, and something that is expected of you, it's hard. It's hard,
Yeah,
and it takes a lot to put your foot down and say, this is who I am, this is who I'm embracing myself to be, and this is how I want to go through the course of my life. And just
mhm.
because you realize it also doesn't make it easy, because you can
Yep.
realize this at the age of 29, at the age of 30, and you're like, oh my god, what happened? I've wasted all this time. And it may always feel like maybe it's too late or something like that, right? So I think that's what I've realized. And also recognizing too that so many changes in your life and so many transitions in your life would reintroduce like a new you to you, if that makes any sense. It's like you can go through your entire life thinking, okay, I'm this person, this is what I do, this is what I like, and all that. But then when you find yourself in a new transition, you may start to find that that maybe you have to revisit certain things about yourself that you thought that was, and then start a new you in that sense.
Yeah, that was very powerful. I had to put you alone for a second because it's identity. Even it's true. Oops, my chair is always messing up. It's true because for Africans in particular, it's a little different story because of a lot of different things. But in general, just like you said,
Right.
everybody suffers with identity.
Everybody.
Some way, somehow, everybody. And it's really hard to understand that unless maybe you've been through some little struggle that you had to overcome, or some kind of aha moment, or maybe some information that you learn, or a little mentor that will show you, hey, dude, this is not how this works. This is how this works, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
blah. So this is very powerful what you're saying.
Right.
But how do you define self-actualized?
Self
Or
actualize,
what does that mean to you?
what it means to me. Okay, I guess self actualize for me is self-knowing. Self-actualize is self-awareness, is self-awareness doesn't necessarily mean that you know all, but it
Mhm.
means that you are aware of what is or not occurring rather, like what is occurring and what's not occurring, right? And it's self-forgiveness as well. It's
Mhm.
self-development. It's prioritizing self, and its purpose, it's
Yeah.
a search for purpose. It's finding out through every stage of your life, what am I supposed to be doing? What am I doing now? It's consciousness. It's consciously living. Because just as I said with identity and us growing up and whatever the case may be, and then taking in what we thought was our identity, but then realizing that is what was coined into us, right?
Mhm.
Consciousness is the awareness that all these things that I'm feeling and all these things is questioning all those things and making sure that those things truly are yours, and not
Right.
somebody else's or not society's norms or whatever the case may be. So for me, that's what the self-actualized is about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good way of putting it, as in all of the selves together,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not only one thing. Even awareness and consciousness, these topics are so deep and there is so many different layers. But you said a good thing. You said questioning these thoughts and then questioning if that's actually yours or if that's somebody else or if
Mm-hmm.
that's the environment, because a lot of times it's the environment, it's
Mm-hmm.
the news, it's maybe the teacher. There
Mm-hmm.
is, I don't know if you know, there's this guy Jim Quick. He's one of the top brain teacher, and he actually, I think that's his first book, if I don't know for sure. But he recently had a book called Limitless, where he kind of talks about, I have it somewhere here. Um, Mindset, motivation, and methods. So how to have a limitless mind, pretty much. And he's also a memory expert. But the point is, when he was a kid, he had learning issues. He couldn't read, he couldn't do a lot of different things. And one of the teachers said that that's the kid with the broken brain.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kid with the broken brain. So he grew up with that identity of being the kid with the broken brain. You see how crazy that is?
Yep.
It was the teacher, right? It wasn't his idea,
Mm-hmm.
from whatever. It was
Mm-hmm.
just the environment. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, as a kid, which a lot of us, all of us, in some ways have had these ideas from
Mm-hmm.
somebody. So he grew up with that, struggled with that, and then eventually overcame it. But
Right.
that's very powerful.
Right.
That ability of questioning. Even also Tony Robbins says, thinking, it's asking yourself questions. So I always say, always try to ask yourself these questions. Even when somebody tells you something,
Mm.
always question it. Is that really true?
That really true.
Is that who I am?
Right.
Where's the truth in that? Is
Exactly.
that actually true? Does that feel true?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you look, man, you look you look ugly today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I know that I'm not ugly, so I can reject the idea or I can accept it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't question
Mm-hmm.
directly, just like the broken brain, you just take the
Mm-hmm.
idea and then it
Mm-hmm.
becomes your identity, and then it becomes, obviously you can overcome it, and then we'll talk a little bit about how to do that.
Right, exactly. And what you just said just reminded me of like one of the popular philosophical quotes. I forget who it's by, but it says, "I think, therefore I am." You know,
Hmm.
that is what separates us as human beings, is the ability to think, ability to rationalize, that kind of thing. So to constantly take in information and then allow it to play a part in your identity without at some point analyzing and then thinking, okay, how is this related, you know what I'm saying, and then fishing out and removing the bad seeds from whatever is being fed to you, because you can't
Yeah,
control what other people put in. You can't control the news and the media, but what you can control is your TV remote, right? And turn
yeah,
it off and change the channel. You can't control that someone may come into your space and seek to cause chaos or anything you're like, but what you can control is how you react towards it, and knowing when to leave the room and knowing when enough is enough, so but yeah, I absolutely agree what you said.
I love that word, control.
Yes.
Control. You can only control what you can control. It's funny, somebody asked me, how do you adapt to change? And that's what I said.
Hmm.
I said, we got to understand that change is like we can't really control change. So that's the only thing that is not going to change. So
Hmm.
when you understand that, now you go like, okay, I know that I cannot control it. So
Hmm.
I accept that. So,
Hmm.
okay, cool. What can I control now? Or what do I
Exactly.
control now? I can
Exactly.
control my remote. So if I don't want to watch CNN today, I don't have to,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
So I,
it's like the popular quote, change is the only constant thing, And even when I talk about self-actualization and finding yourself, and then maybe at any point dealing with any sort of transition, and usually when you're dealing with transitions, or you're moving into like a new phase of your life, or you're reflecting on your past life, you may find yourself thinking, oh my God, I wish I could go back. I wish I could. And believe me, I've been there. I think a lot of us have been there, right? But once you
right.
realize that you can't control time, you can't go back, unfortunately. We don't know what is really in the afterlife or whatever the case may be. The only thing that you can control is right now. Then that's when you
Mhm.
consciously decide, okay, how am I going to move forward from here on out, and then take control of your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
This is so true.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what for maybe somebody that actually wants to overcome, let's say some type of identity, even maybe the broken brain, or like for me, I used to think that I wasn't good enough. Let's actually go with that because I think a lot of people, most of everybody feel like that, not good enough.
Right.
So, how, in your opinion, how could be a way to change that identity of not feeling good enough?
Good enough. Yeah. That's a very tough question, to be honest, because just as you said, even myself too, there are a lot of times that I feel incapable. There are a lot of times that I feel not good enough, right? But I think for me, the what has always worked for me is being true to myself. Like
Mm-hmm.
some people shy away from their shadows. Some people shy away from their reflection in the mirror. Some people shy away, and what's it called? They 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 self what's the word I'm looking for? But like they self medicate, but that's a bad word. But like almost like they try to minimize or use certain things, maybe like alcohol, or like certain relationship with certain people and whatnot, to um what is the word I'm looking for? But to what's the word when you're like pushing
Is
something
it
down? Um
being a victim or pushing the fault to other people,
yeah, that
putting
part,
on other
that
people?
is part of it, but also like they move it almost to their subconscious, they push it on the back burner, you understand, and you see their insecurities
Mm,
and a lot of things that they are struggling with come out in so many other ways, or in addiction, or in certain behavioral attitudes and all that, right, rather than being true to themselves with how
right.
they're feeling, right? So usually, at least for me, the times when I'm feeling down or not good enough and all that, I find that my anxiety is very high, right?
Mhm.
And then I find that maybe I'm a bit more snappy with things, or I can even sometimes maybe get a bit of like almost a depressive mood, and I think
Right.
that happens for a lot of people, where it's just like all of a sudden I just don't want to get out of bed, I'm just like completely burnt out and that kind of thing. So it's recognizing that challenge,
Mm,
that you're being challenged, that stuff is happening for you. And I know sometimes it's hard, because obviously
yeah.
you're going to work, you're going to school, whatever it is that you're doing, you're just moving through life. But you would know, and maybe you can also find, or you may find yourself having conflicts with certain people and whatnot, but in those aspects of self-reflection is when you'd be like, okay, I know that this happened and all that, but could I have done better? And why did I really react that way? I don't think that's necessarily like myself, So
Mm,
asking yourself those important questions. And that's why I feel like spending time and taking time to yourself is extremely important, right? And that's the thing. A lot of people, especially those that maybe don't want to be confronted with whatever that they're dealing with tend to surround themselves, or tend to find, are like, what's the word I'm looking for? But tend to be constantly wanting to like do things to keep themselves busy, you understand, or to constantly be interacting with, what I'm saying, like until they are worn out through the day and they can just fall asleep. They don't really like their quiet time. And that's why we've seen a rise in mental health during this COVID period, because all of a sudden people were forced to look at themselves in the mirror. They couldn't go to the
Yeah,
club every Friday or every Saturday, or as they used to and whatnot. So it's because all of a sudden they had to be confronted with
you have
those
to
true
face.
emotions, right? That they feel on the inside. So for me, to answer your question, the first thing is just simply being aware. I think when you're aware of anything that is going on with you, that is the first point to healing. I'm more concerned when somebody like is living their life and it's obvious that they don't really know, they're not really aware of what's going on with them, as to those that are aware and at least are working to it. Because once you're aware, then you can at least actually start to work through it, right? And I would say know your know what maybe may trigger you, know what know ask yourself why you feel that way, and then just do yourself homework. Now, I would strongly recommend that, depending on how you're feeling, if you don't feel like it's getting any better, to definitely see a therapist. These days we have so many online therapy apps and all those kind of things, right? That you can get involved with. But I 100% recommend that.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
self-love, you can't go wrong with self-love. Take time
yeah,
to do what you love to do. That helps.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
This is so crazy, but I've got a few things, and a big a big part of one of them is identify, because this is really the first step of all of it. Being aware, identify, and in order to do that, just like you said, you gotta face and spend that quiet time with yourself, which is the hardest part.
Yeah.
And even for, it's kind of like that imposter syndrome thing. It doesn't go away.
It does.
Like, I'm still scared every time I make a video. If you're watching me right now, I'm talking to you. Every single time I make a video, I'm still scared. I'm still like, what is this guy going to think? What is what is that guy going to think? What is blah blah blah? But dude, I've made a commitment, so I face the fear, and then I rise or I run. But because I don't want to be a little bitch, so I choose to run. I choose to rise, sorry, instead of running. So this thing doesn't really go away. It's always going to be there. So what decision are you going to do into that moment? That's the thing. So, and it's very critical what you were saying with the COVID. A lot of people never took that time to to take the time to be with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were all quarantined, it was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do now?
Mm-hmm.
Which is can be bad, but for a lot of people, they started figuring out. So just like Mildred was saying, if you can really face the demons, I know it's hard. It's hard for everybody, bro. I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm. It
But
is.
that's what we all gotta do.
Yeah.
uh, Take that time, face the demons, identify what's going on, and then ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
I also said that whether it's a therapist, and then don't be like, within the African community, we all grew up like that, bro. I'm telling you. Earlier, she was talking about regret. You don't want to get to 90 years old and then sit down and be like, damn, I wish I did this. I wish I did that. This is the worst. You think your girlfriend breaking up is hard? This is hard. This is the hardest thing, man. So please ask for help. I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what you're saying. I feel like the worst thing that can happen is to like sit and look back and ask yourself, like, who did I live for? Like, who am I? Like, still ask yourself that even in your late age. So, just as I feel like that's personally even my worst fear. And as much as you can do right now to create and just live in your truth and live like, in your moments, and live true to yourself. I feel like that's the best thing, you can do for yourself.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And the other thing that you said was self-love.
Mm-hmm.
And self-love, it's a lot of different things, but you said the thing that I love about self-love, which is doing the things that you love. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you can only do that, that alone will make you the happiest person ever.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to be on camera, blah blah blah.
Mhm.
You don't have to do
You
that.
have to.
Even if you do it in the shower, like a lot
Mhm.
of people dance in the shower singing, hey, do it, man.
Yeah.
Nobody is looking at it,
Yeah,
but
exactly. I'm one of those people. Like, I love karaoke, and I'll just like legit be, I have like, I'm not even joking. I have like a whole karaoke mic, and I'll just literally be doing karaoke, and I'll be cracking myself up. Like, you know what
yeah,
I mean? Just do that, like laugh.
that's it.
That's
That's
it.
really it. If you can, even if you've been watching this for like 26 minutes we've been on and you don't do nothing else, take a little paper or your phone, make a list of all of the things that you really, really love to do.
Mm-hmm.
Just start doing, man, one at a
Just do
time.
it.
Knock them down one
Just
at a time. This thing alone will make you happy. Only do that.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. And I also had a last question. I'm a little curious as of what's one of the maybe worst or craziest situation that you've seen since you've been studying psychology and
Mhm.
doing the podcast and all of the people that you've seen? Because I remember I've seen on your account you've posted one of the craziest story I've heard.
Yeah.
Um, there was, I think it was, if I remember correct, there was this woman and her son end up in suicide because
Mm-hmm.
all of the trauma that he had at school, at this. I was like, oh my God. Because I saw myself into that kid. I literally saw myself into that kid having all of these little traumas, whether it's at school, whether it's with the girlfriend. And the girlfriend thing, that's a whole different story because there is so much that the guys don't even understand. So that's a whole, I can literally have a whole channel, a whole different channel about that. But the point is, I literally saw myself into that kid and I was like, man, I wonder how many had a kid, or not even necessarily kid. I'm 20 something and I'm still a kid. So we all kids, millennials, whatever, we all kids. So I was wondering how many of us are still in that situation, maybe thinking about suicide or not, and not even asking for help or feeling like. So I was wondering, maybe if you remember that story, if you can talk about that a little bit.
I do, yes. Yeah, because that was a reposted story of I think it was like a South African lady and her son, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, I'm not a practicing psychologist or counselor or anything, right? I did major in that. Actually, that is kind of what I wanted to, the area I wanted to move to in my life, and kind of also was part of inspiring my podcast. It's still a work in progress. That's a whole different story for another time. But um, I just want to say that depression is real. You know,
Yeah.
mental health, mental illness needs to be taken more seriously. Um, I, of course, majored in that and whatever the case, but when I experienced, some of it by myself, depression, anxiety, and all those, things by myself too, I realized even how more real it is,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, and it's a very weird thing because people always tend to think, well, it's your mind. You should be able to control it, get over it, talk to somebody. You don't realize how hard it is to actually talk to somebody. You know,
Yeah.
that's why when we talk about mental health and all that, we always say, see a therapist, that kind of, whatever the case may be, that kind of thing. But you yourself that's telling somebody that should see a therapist,
Are
make
you
sure,
doing that?
exactly, right? You do, and also make sure to also follow up with the person that you're telling to see the therapist. You understand? And if you can physically
Right.
get them there, then
Right.
physically do that, because you have to almost think about it the way you think about physical illness as well. When a
Right.
person is physically ill, and I'm not even talking about any kind of like, let's not even get into like the horrible, horrible illness, but let's just even say little thing like breaking your leg or something, right? You're bedridden. You have a cast. You understand? You may want to stand up and do certain things, but you need assistance to do that.
Yeah.
When you start to think about mental health in that same capacity, then you would start to have more empathy for people that are going through it, right? In that video, for example, she mentioned that she noticed that maybe her son was sad. I think my memory is not to be. It's been a while since I posted that video, but that she was her son was sad, and maybe I think maybe the aunties or somebody was trying to help him, but he wouldn't like really talk. And then she unfortunately went to the room one day and then saw him, that he had taken his own life, right? But the thing was that usually, and I find that Africans we do that thing a lot, like Africans are in the habit of having children, throwing them in boarding schools sometimes, or just like, oh, get good grades. And then once that's done, then they are ready to ship you off to university, but never really asking that child, how are you? How are you interacting or even studying for themselves, because, and I mean, sometimes, of course, when you're in boarding school, your parents are not there. So they don't get to study what your interactions may be or how you feel every single day after you come back from school, right? But we have to realize that wherever you're sending your child to, they are coming in contact with so many people. They are being told so many things by so many people. Just as you were talking about the book, and what the teacher had told the guy and whatnot, that kind of thing. I was actually one of those kids too. You understand? People
Mm-hmm.
are so quick to put a label on you. We're so attached and so uh attached, like they create our identity based on what it is that they may or may not see on paper. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like a student feels something or a child comes back with a bad grade and all of a sudden he's dumb. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, or that kind of thing. Totally missing out on the fact that people are different. And the biggest task for you as a parent or a guardian or whoever you may be in another person's life is realizing what their difference is, working with their strength and encouraging them through their weakness and also working with that, right? But if a child is constantly hearing how horrible they are and then they're seeing other people maybe doing well in school and that kind of thing, why wouldn't the child internalize that? Why wouldn't you internalize it and think, okay, I'm stupid? And then what happens when you think that? A lack of self-worth, you know,
Yeah.
and then lack of self-worth leads to what? Anxiety, depression. And then you're asking yourself, why am I getting up? Why am I wasting my parents' school fees? Why am I getting up to do this every morning? There's no point. I'm a burden on other people. And before
Yeah.
you know it, they've internalized that so much and they've now believed that as their truth, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and then they don't have the will to live anymore. They can't see life past the identities that have been given to them,
Right.
So I think mental health is important. I personally obviously haven't seen, more than what I've read or, heard or certain things like that, that kind of thing, or even from my own personal experiences, I haven't necessarily experienced any bad thing, but what I know is based on what I've read, personal experience and those kind of things. And what I've learned for that is that we as people need to do better. There's power in words that we speak. There's
Yeah.
power in the words that we speak to others. There are things that we say and say to people all the time that we don't even realize are necessarily hurting them. And we're all guilty of it. Nobody is, even me myself that I know better, 100% I'm guilty of it. Even the simple things. Oh my gosh, you look good, you've lost weight, or oh, you've added weight. Those little things that Africans say a lot, right? But yet you don't know what medical conditions the person is going to. Oh,
Yeah.
you're married, you don't have the kid yet. You don't know what they are going
Good
through,
point.
with their
Good point.
fertility issues,
Good
that kind of thing. It's not okay or you see somebody and then you immediately, like, even in my job sometimes, I may have to ask people certain questions or that kind of thing, and then I'll be like, oh, and I have to be careful because you don't want to ask people, things like, oh, how many children do you have? Because what if they don't have children and they're having fertility issues and trying to have children? You know what I'm saying? And I know that we can't get it right all the time, but I feel
Yeah,
like if we are aware about the things that we're saying and how we say it and questions that we ask and comments that we ask, even though unfortunately it's so normalized, to be like, oh, you've lost weight, oh, you've added weight, that kind of thing. We should maybe start to understand that, like, it's not okay if the person is not directly talking about it and not allowing that conversation to happen. I think it's better to talk about other things or just simply ask, how are you? Ask the open-ended questions. And then whatever information they're okay giving you, then go from there. But in conclusion, mental health is very, very real. And we should walk around being very conscious about the mental health of others and how what we may say may trigger other people, and lead to a bad day for them or even like possibly end their life.
yeah, yeah. I agree with that, especially the because when you were talking about watch your words, that is so true at different levels. Really watch your words, the way you talk to yourself, the way you talk to other people, and
Right.
also learning how to communicate because you can't get it right all the time, just like
No.
you said. Don't feel bad about it. But I love how you said that as long as you are aware, because once you are aware and once the intention, because a lot of times it's the intention behind it that hurts.
Mm-hmm.
So when once you're aware and you can question yourself a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
then your intention might come out different. Then it
Right.
may not be a problem because you are aware, right? So
Mm-hmm.
maybe you framed it a little differently or you communicated a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very, very important to watch your words,
Yeah.
even even with yourself.
Even with
Even,
yourself.
even
Yeah.
with
And if you don't have nothing nice to say, don't say nothing at all. Is that
yourself. That's a good
just
point.
keep your mouth shut?
Keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually my last question. So, guys, but a really, really big part of everything that we said with all of the mental health, as hard as it is to ask for help, a very, very good step is really, really identifying what's the identity that you really want.
Mm-hmm.
And then to make it simple for you, literally write it down.
Right.
Like write it down so that you can see it, you can look at it, write
Right.
it down. Then just like you said earlier, have your list of the things that you really love to do, and then start
Mm-hmm.
knocking them down as well. If you can only do these two, this is a really, really great start. Now everything else would come on. The courage to ask for help would come through, blah 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 would come through. Watching these videos as well really, really help.
Mm-hmm.
So to hand to hang on that, I wanted to ask, for everybody that's watching that doesn't know you, where can everybody find you on your podcast, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify? Where can people find you and connect with you?
Right. So the name of podcast is at the Self-Actualized Podcast, is one word, and is on Instagram. I'm only on Instagram for now. I do want to come into the YouTube world eventually. But
Mm.
yeah, just find me at Self-Actualized Podcast on Instagram and then just follow me and then I'll work from there. Honestly, today you've inspired me to go back and like work on my podcast. I also run a food page on Instagram. It's called at Don't Hate Cause You Ain't Eight. I know it's a word twister, but you'll find it on my bio page on my podcast as well. So I usually, I think, put more of my energy on that. But I do want to do go back to do this. I was doing it before, and then I don't know if most of you guys heard about the NSAS protest that happened in Nigeria, but during that period when that happened, it kind of like killed my spirit a little bit, just as I was talking about mental health. So I took a
Yeah,
long mental break since then, and I've just kind of been working myself towards coming back. But yeah, just find me on there, I guess.
yeah, definitely. That's also something that I've been wanting to talk about,
Yeah.
and I need to find a bunch of. I need to get all my Nigerians friends together. It actually gives me that idea.
Hmm.
Getting all of, I mean, all of the Nigerians I know on here, and then talk about that.
Right.
Start. That would be nice. So, guys,
That will be.
at the Self Actualized Podcast, if you want to connect with Mildred and learn a little more about what she does, and then I've learned about what she does, and I've reached out, and then she's here today.
Yes.
So thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Thank you for having me. You have no idea. You actually have like gotten the ball rolling for me. You made me a bit excited to like
That's
get back
good.
to this. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
That's good. Yeah, I can't wait for
Mhm.
everything that you'll be coming up with.
Yeah.
And guys, again, at the Self Actualized Podcast, this will be posted on Facebook and YouTube at Just Move Mindset TV. And again, thank you guys for tuning in, everybody that was watching. And we'll see you guys on the next episode. Have an amazing rest of your day.
Have a great
Peace.
day. Peace.